This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to Spouses Talking Houses with husband and wife real estate team Jennifer and Brian Frost. Everything you want to know about buying, selling, investing, and owning property. So let's get real about real estate.
Welcome back to Spouses Talking Houses. I'm Jennifer.
I'm Brian.
And our guest today is Chris Pryor with Envirovantage Environmental. Hi, Chris.
Hi, how are you, Chris?
I might have said the name of the business wrong. I'll have him correct that if needed.
Wait a minute. Yeah. No,
exactly. So today we are going to get real about lead paint and asbestos in homes. How do you determine if you have it? What do you do if you have it? And when should you leave it alone? So pretty serious stuff. And I think we're going to find out that it's a lot easier to deal with than people might think.
Okay.
Yeah, I hope we find that out. In the meantime, let's just talk about the realtor lifestyle and what we've been doing. It's December 18th, I think, and I've just been working on a couple
It
of...
would be the 17th.
Oh, it's the 17th. All right. It's the 17th. You did get to correct me.
There
Good.
you go.
Yeah, that's his main job, is to correct me when I'm wrong. And so we're just working on a couple of year-end closings, including a cash investor purchase on a condo, somebody buying a piece of land for a second home. We've got somebody buying a new home that they're going to be moving into just prior to Christmas. So yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, it's been a busy year.
It's been a crazy year, but it's been a busy year.
Looking forward to next year.
Yeah. I'm not going to have a New Year's party as much as a let's put 2020 behind us party. Yeah. Which will be a party of two.
Sure.
Since we're quarantining. Anyway, Chris, what are your plans for the holidays?
So we're going to stay local. Historically, we would have gone to a sunny tropical destination the day after Christmas, but we're going to forego those plans, keep our fingers crossed. We have one planned for February vacation instead, and hopefully we can put all this stuff behind us and get back to hanging out with friends and having a good time. Yeah,
we're thinking, of course, I'm a fair weather skier anyway, but I'm thinking the ski resorts are going to be open, and they say that you can tailgate in the parking lot since they're not going to have the lodges open. So that sounds pretty reasonable, at least to get out of the house.
Yeah, for sure.
That's going to be the tough part this winter. But we're going to have the puppy, so we're going to play with the puppy in the snow. And I have to take it out in the freezing cold to go sprain it.
She's already rethinking this, and we haven't even got him yet.
I know, exactly. It got to be 20 degrees yesterday, and I said, uh-oh.
Yep. Hold out there right now, I can tell you that.
Exactly. But it's time for us to get real about lead paint and asbestos. So, Chris, I started in real estate in 1983, and at that time, the lead paint law was new. And houses, up until 5 years prior had been built quite commonly with lead paint. But now I'm seeing less and less and less of an issue of it coming up in our transactions. My first question always is if somebody's going to test for it, you can't possibly test every surface in the house. So I don't know how you effectively test for lead paint in a residence.
Yeah, so from a testing standpoint, to echo what you had said, it was a major or perceived major problem many years ago. I think with knowledge and education, people have gotten to the point where they understand, okay, it exists. How do I manage it? And determining whether or not it's posing a problem is really what it needs to be done. So my advice would be to hire a lead inspector. Usually what they're bringing along with them is something called an XRF gun. And they basically put it to a substrate, whether it's a cabinet or door trim or painted wall surface, pull the trigger and it will let them know what the lead content is of that painted or varnished material. And then from there, they'll also determine its condition. So is it loose and flaking? Is it in terrific condition? And then from there, they generate a report. These reports can be 50 pages long, but at the end of the day, there might only be one or two items that need to get addressed. So again, it's a key to knowledge as opposed to fear mongering.
Well, that's excellent, because you're not taking a chip off and you're not waiting for a lab report to come in. So I like the idea of that. And I also think maybe one of the reasons I'm not seeing it so much is we've got like 45, almost 50 years of houses being built without the lead paint in them. And we've got that same period of time of houses getting de-leaded, and particularly multifamilies. It's always a concern in multifamilies, but it really should be a concern for anybody who's got young children. And I also think pets. I mean, they've got small systems, so and they're just as likely to eat a paint chip as a toddler is.
Yeah, and thankfully for folks that do own multifamily properties, the law in New Hampshire has changed more recently, where if there was a lead poisoning case, whether or not that child actually received the poisoning from the home they were living in, it was a demand on the owner of the property to abate the entire property, not just the unit in which that child lives. I believe it was last year, maybe even the year before, the laws changed, where now it's only the unit, because the price can be astronomical if you have to de-lead an entire 5-unit building.
Yeah. So if for us, typically what we would end up seeing is maybe it's a 1940s house, little bungalow type of thing, and there is some peeling and flaking trim, or some peeling and flaking on the exterior paint. So if you were called in on a situation like that, how do you address that?
One, you'd want to find out, what the intent is for the homeowner. Do they like the character of, let's use the door trim? Yeah. Does it have a detail in it that is critical to remain, and then therefore we have to use a chemical solution to essentially peel the paint off, or is economics more important to them and they're looking for a quick solution? And in that case, we just remove the trim altogether and install new door trim. So it's a faster, more economical solution. So really understanding the intent of the homeowner is key.
You had mentioned varnish too. Now, I had thought the law referred to paint and not varnish, because I do understand that lead was very commonly used in varnish, and I don't know, maybe it still is.
I'm unsure if it still is. The reason why I think it would be important to know if the lead exists is if it's in an area where dust can be made. So think of a door, how it may strike a door casing, or windows sliding up and down in their channel. It's lead dust that is really the thing that you want to manage and take care of.
And you can get a lead certificate if you have lead paint that is intact. Is that correct?
I believe by having the lead inspector come out and do the full survey of the property, they can provide certificates of compliance, essentially, where although it is a snapshot in time, so if there's a renovation that takes place, or conditions change, obviously the condition of that material is going to change as well.
Yeah. So it's when it's disturbed and when it's peeling and flaking is usually, especially in the appraisal world, like the big red flag, peeling and flaking paint. Yeah. Because when it's intact, there's A, no lead dust, and B, nobody's eating it. But particularly trim and windowsills, have that tendency to crack and to peel and to be exposed to the weather, and for people to start sanding it. And so those are always areas of concern.
Is it more common to encapsulate the areas rather than actually removing the paint?
Yeah, so on a window sill, as an example, one of the reasons why I'm so concerned about that is a toddler nibbling,
right,
as that may seem, but they do have encapsulants, some paints that contain what's called Bitrix, which is a very bitter tasting additive. So if someone chews on it, they get an unbelievably bitter taste in their mouth, and
because they say
they don't
that paint tastes sweet.
Yeah, they say the paint.
Kids,
they
right?
say the chips taste sweet. Yeah,
yep.
I've never eaten one to my knowledge. So,
oh, I'm sure you've eaten a few.
I just always ate the little dough and paste at school.
Okay.
Yeah. So that explains a few things. So similar to lead paint, asbestos is something we run into with the older homes in the siding and wrapped around pipes sometimes. And that's something else, again, that intact is good. Friable is the red flag word there. But just the word asbestos, I think, is very like, uh-oh, what's going on here? Yeah,
it's true. Asbestos was used in thousands of products. So you mentioned pipe insulation on the old steam systems. There was the siding on the exterior of homes. A lot of 9x9 floor tiles and sheet floorings contained it. Other items that you wouldn't suspect. Textured ceiling in the 60s, 70s time frame.
Yeah.
The popcorn ceilings contained it. Window glazing, vermiculite insulation, if you're familiar with that. That tends to be up in the attic. People, when we get calls, people ask all the time, because it can be expensive to do asbestos abatement. Are there any programs that exist to help offset the cost? If it's talking about vermiculite attic insulation, if it's a product called Zonalite, then there is a rebate that's available to homeowners. It's a little over $4,000. Essentially what happened out in Libby, Montana, this material was mined. The mine was sold to the W.R. Grace Corporation, and I think they knew that asbestos was there, and then there was a class action lawsuit. So they set aside $4 billion to help offset the cost to get rid of this material. And but like other asbestos-containing products, the EPA and New Hampshire DES have the same shared opinion, which is if you leave it alone, it's fine. If you need to do an energy improvement and you're removing the material, assume it contains asbestos. Or if you're going to do a renovation that's disturbing it, assume that it contains asbestos.
So if somebody goes and sticks their head up in the attic to look for vermiculite, it's a loose style of insulation, right?
Right.
What does it look like?
Looks like little tiny stones.
Okay. Like pebbles?
Yeah.
Like gray?
Gray, white, and some shiny, looks like maybe mica.
Okay.
It was like the stuff that came out of our zero clearance chimney.
Right.
When we changed that. But I assume that was not asbestos.
But you don't know. And I used to see it in multifamilies when I first started. I used to see it in these triple deckers where they had the big octopus-style furnaces in the center of the basement, and then they were completely covered in this white asbestos. I see it, of course, less and less as the years go by. These things get removed, but
Right.
I ran into it in Nashville recently too.
Yeah, we call those snowman boilers, actually, because they
snowmen.
look like,
okay, that's
little
right.
Snowman, but if it's an air system like what you're talking about, right, it does look like a big octopus down in the basement. They tended to use an asbestos duct wrapping on the joints to keep the air within the ducts. So asbestos is in, like I said, thousands of products. It's really, you need to know whether it's a friable material or a non-friable material, which I'll describe in a minute, and really what its condition is. So friable means that you can place it in your hand and easily grind it into a dust. And so an example of that would be the vermiculite insulation and the pipe insulation. The asbestos pipe insulation looks like a corrugated cardboard box that has been placed around the heating pipes. So if you look down one end of it, you can see the corrugated parts, and then inside of that is where they put the loose fill asbestos. So if you squeeze those really hard, well, don't first.
Not
if it did happen, you would see a dust come out of those. So that is a friable type of insulation. Non-friable would be like your sheet flooring, something that was inlaid in vinyl as a bonding agent. So very hard, if not impossible, to make that friable unless you're using a hammer or a scraper or something to create dust.
And you're better off there just covering that with another floor covering, correct?
It really depends on the situation. Talking about some older, 5-story buildings, there may already be 3 layers of flooring on there. So adding another layer might not make the most sense. But we certainly have given advice to if it had floor tile and the glue or the mastic that held it down contained asbestos, and the intent was to put an additional floor over the top of it, then it doesn't make sense to remove that material. Just put something over the top of it.
So when I see those older wrapped heating pipes, and it looks like a white cast, almost like a cast you'd have on your leg, the asbestos is inside it. It's not that fibrous material on the outside.
That's right. So what you just described, the cast material, it would most likely, not an abatement, but an encapsulation has already been performed. They do make a wetting type cast material called lag cloth that can go wrap around to stabilize pipe insulation. We tend not to do that work. We favor the removal only because when you're dealing with a real estate transaction, the cost is nearly the same to do removal or wrapping. And at the end of the day, if you're wrapping it, you still have the presence of asbestos, which could be a detriment to the future sale. So why not get rid of it when you have the opportunity and let that be one less obstacle?
What are we looking for generally as a cost range? Let's say we're talking about one of those snowmen furnaces. And
luckily, I don't see those very often anymore.
We have to remove all that asbestos. What are we looking at for?
If it's just the boiler itself, so there is a process. Whether it doesn't matter which state you live in, you have to notify the Department of Environmental Services or Protection, depending on which state it is, and it also depends on the quantity. So there's notification costs that are associated with it. Then there's regulations behind how the material is removed. So we'll have to set up containment barriers around the material, decontamination chambers, negative air pressure, so that, again, the asbestos is not making its way outside of the work zone. And then after the work is done and we believe that we've done a good job, we have to bring in an independent company that will come in, do a visual inspection, and take air samples to validate our work. So a snowman boiler can be $3,000 to $8,000, depending on how big of a unit it is.
Okay.
Yeah, what you just described is a lot. Sounds like a lot of work. We most frequently run into asbestos with that old-fashioned siding, the large shingles, that's practically bulletproof and is still underneath vinyl and aluminum, I think, in a lot of homes. So in most cases, I don't think that comes off. I think it gets covered up, right?
Right. That is the one head scratcher that I have when it comes to asbestos abatement. If you do the removal of that material and you're not the homeowner, you're hiring someone to remove it, it has to be done by an asbestos abatement contractor. However, if you hire a siding company to hang vinyl and slam a nail straight through it, they don't need to be an asbestos abatement contractor. So that's the one thing that I don't quite follow.
Oh, so those installers are potentially breathing this dust then every time they do that.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's not good.
It's easier and cheaper.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying, like if you are scraping and painting an older house that potentially has lead paint, you have to use lead safe practices. So I would think that to install siding over asbestos would also require specific practices too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and every state has their own asbestos regulations. So New Hampshire tends to be a little bit more lenient than Massachusetts. A material has to contain at least 1% asbestos content in order to be determined as an asbestos-containing material. However, in Massachusetts, they say any trace amount of asbestos is an asbestos-containing material, which puts a lot of people in a pretty tough situation. And whether or not a homeowner can do their own abatement as well depends on which state you're in.
And are there financial assistance programs for people who are looking to do that type of asbestos outside of the vermiculite, the one brand that you mentioned earlier?
I believe that the programs that exist, there may be some grants available. They're few and far between. The Mass Save program may offer some low finance options as well, but there's not a lot of resources.
Yeah. I would imagine that you run into asbestos quite a bit with these mill conversions.
Oh, definitely. So you're going to run into everything from flooring materials, again, the pipe insulation that we spoke about, the window glazings on the older buildings may have contained an asbestos material. So whether it's a mill building or someone who intends to demolish a building, an asbestos inspection needs to occur before the demolition can happen. So you'd hire an asbestos inspector. They would come out and look at the materials that are suspect for asbestos and test all of the materials, and then a report is generated, and then based on that report, you'll know what has to get removed before the building can be demolished or burned through a local fire department or what the case may be.
So what is window glazing? Is that on the glass itself?
Yes. So whether it's a 2x2 window or a 6/6, the putty that was used to hold the window in place.
Okay.
See them on the older windows.
Yeah. All right. And again, intact, maybe better to leave it the way that it is.
Right. So most of the time that we'll get a call on a window, someone's doing an energy improvement, maybe with a double layered vinyl window, and they have these old window sashes that have the glazing on it. It's very simple to, you just bundle it up as a whole component and make sure that, it's going into the right waste stream is basically what we want to make sure.
Yeah, I was going to ask where do you dispose of this stuff?
Rochester, New Hampshire is where most of it
Oh dear.
The waste management it's called the turnkey facility. in Rochester. They have a specialized cell, and so that's where a lot of the waste goes. There's a location it's called Norwich Walk, Maine, and then there's also, depending on quantities, sometimes it will get shipped to Ohio or other areas throughout the country.
So do they incinerate it, bury it?
Bury it.
Bury it. Okay. Deep.
Yep. Deep in the ground. It's got to be, so the packaging of the material goes 20 mil thickness. So if you've got a contractor grade trash bag, those tend to be 6 mil. So you tend to double wrap that. It goes into a dumpster that's also double wrapped. So when it's going down the road, it's essentially 20 mils in thickness, and then they dump it out the back of the truck and bury it with dirt.
Wow, that's interesting. So for our listeners who own or are purchasing an older home, what should they watch for in regards to lead or asbestos?
Really, it's the condition. So I wouldn't, I don't think that there's any reason to throw up a red flag or walk away from a building simply because asbestos or lead was detected. It's more so, working with good agents like yourself to manage the material that exists and have that going forward as the management strategy. And if remediation or abatement or encapsulation needs to be done, make sure that you understand all aspects to it.
And then you must have special licenses and certifications for all of your staff members who work with those materials.
That's right. And actually in the state of New Hampshire, our lead license is number 1. So we have,
wow.
Yeah, the owner of the company helped write the laws here in New Hampshire. And as such, we were granted lead license number 1.
All right. And then I'm wondering, Maryland doesn't seem like a natural jumping off point like Stoneham, Mass or Maine is. So is there a personal connection to why you guys ended up with an office in Maryland?
So we do a lot of federal government work. And we had the opportunity to do some work at what's called the Aberdeen Proving Grounds down there. Several buildings that had asbestos contamination that also needed to be demolished. So we have crews down there. We'll be down there for the foreseeable future, at least the next 5 years on this project.
Wow.
I think that project was somewhere around $35 million to do the abatement and building takedowns. And there's
we ran into
material out there.
We ran into that with Pease, and what's the one in Shirley, Mass? The former military base. But apparently on the military bases, even after they passed these environmental laws that affected the rest of our residences, all of the military bases were exempt, so they continued to just build them with tons of these harmful materials.
Are you talking about Devon's?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. The military will keep us hopefully employed for a very long time.
Yeah. Because did you do any work over at Pease?
Yeah. So the Portsmouth Navy Shipyard. We have crews working there every day of the year. We don't work on weekends, or holidays, but we hope to be there for the foreseeable future. Pease, we've done a fair amount of work over there, whether it's asbestos abatement or hazardous heavy metals. They just upgraded, as you may know, the tanker divisions, the refueling planes. And so the hangars needed to be reconstructed. So we had to go in there and do some cleaning before the demolition could begin to get rid of some heavy metals there. But we work at a lot of government installations. This past year, we actually made our way out to South Dakota at a hydroelectric facility called the Fort Randall Dam. They when they built that in the 1950s, the brake shoes on the turbines contained asbestos. So every time they'd slow the turbines down, they'd release a little asbestos and would get into the ductwork. So we did the cleaning of ductwork out there, and we just won a project in North Dakota as well at another hydroelectric facility, and that project will take place next year.
That's fascinating. You guys do a lot of interesting stuff. That's very cool.
Every day is an adventure, like doing a podcast.
Yeah, exactly. I have a book that was my great grandmother's gardening book, and I thought, oh, this is wonderful, and I'm going to see all like the old school way of doing things. Well, this entire book, every recommendation is to use the newest and latest and greatest chemicals, to kill insects and all of this stuff. So
non-organic gardening?
Not very or anti-organic gardening. So it was eye-opening to find out that in the old days, they just thought chemicals were great.
Yes, they did.
So we want to thank you so much for joining us, Chris, and to help people get real about lead paint and asbestos. And it's really great that you have these services to help people and businesses treat their buildings and make them healthier.
Yeah, thank you. And again, folks, if they have questions, they can reach out to us. We're happy to answer questions as it relates to lead paint or asbestos or mold. Really, any indoor air quality issue, they can reach out to us. And if we can't assist them, we know enough people in the industry where we could at least point them in the right direction.
All right, excellent. Do you also treat for smoke?
Smoke odor?
Yeah.
We do. If you want to touch on that just briefly, but really you've got to get rid of, if it's carpeting, as an example, typically you remove all the porous materials, curtains and so forth. It may be that you have to wash the walls with an enzyme to get rid of the tars and the nicotines and everything else that exists, and then apply a coating over the top of it. A lot of folks will use ozone as kind of a final step. That is losing favor for something called a hydroxyl generator, which kind of works on the same premise, but it's like a smoke itself, and so it will go and will destroy odors by breaking molecules.
Well, because we normally podcast above the smoke shop, so when you mentioned indoor air quality, I wondered about that. That I will say that is one thing people really don't tolerate in real estate is walking into a home that smells like cigarette smoke
Or pet urine.
Or pet urine. Yeah, exactly. So again, thank you so much. And we thank our listeners. We look forward to continuing in the new year with much more information to help you be better buyers and sellers and homeowners. So thank you so much for listening to Spouses Talking Houses. Like, share, and subscribe. And I would just love a review. I read 2 reviews this week that made me so happy. And if you have any questions you want us to address in the future, we're open to that as well. Take care.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Music courtesy of the Eric Lindbergh Trio. Please visit his website at www.ericlindberghworld.com. Jennifer and Brian are licensed to practice real estate in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. Brian is also a certified general appraiser in New Hampshire. They are not lawyers, accountants, home inspectors, or therapists. Real estate customs and rules may be different in your area. Each Keller Williams Realty office is independently owned and operated. The realtor name is trademarked to members of the National Association of Realtors. If you are currently under contract with a real estate agent, this is not intended as a solicitation. Views expressed on this podcast by Jennifer may not be shared by Brian and vice versa, nor are they necessarily the views of Keller Williams Realty.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21, Podcast Café, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.